Hi guys, my name is Rita, and I am the student B acting as the supporter in this motivational interviewing session. Today, I will present my experimental learning journey with my client Venus. This is the table of content, so this whole video will be divided into four parts. Part one will be background and analysis. Part two will be the summary of the whole and my processes. And part three will be a integrative reflection and my self-critique. And a conclusion will be provided in the end of this video. So the first part is about background and analysis about Venus, autobiography, and some of our interactions. So Venus is a year four psychology student. It's a detail that is crucial because her professional background significantly influences her awareness and her ambivalence towards change. As for her own awareness, Venus's personality and the metaphor, she describes herself using three keywords: sensitive, introspective, and resilient. In our session and her autobiography, she introduced a powerful metaphor from the tarot, the hangman. She sees herself hanging from a rope. She knows her direction. She sees the sky, but she feels immobilized. Her feet are tied by fear and overthinking, leaving her hands unstable to grasp the rope and climb. And this mental exhaustion is the core of her struggle. She spent so much energy fighting her internal anxieties that she has little left for her actual goals. And as for her circle of emotional eating, this is our behavioral analysis. So the target behavior we identified is emotional eating. For Venus, food is not about nutrition, it is her plan B. When she feels ignored in relationships or overwhelmed by the noise in her thoughts, she retreats into private space with high calorie food and TV shows, and this creates what she calls a blank space. It's like a temporary grounding that bypasses painful emotions. However, this creates a secondary conflict. As a future therapist, she values authentic experience, yet she is using food to numb her experiences. So this discrepancy is where our MI intervention begins. Despite her challenges and struggles, Venus still has a significant resource, which is her relationship with her puppy. Through caring for her dog, she has discovered her capacity for a stable and responsive love, something she missed in her own childhood. And this capacity to love and care is a strength we aimed to bridge towards her self-care during the session. The part two is about the summary of MI process. So the first one is engaging, establishing a respectful curiosity. So I initiated the session by acknowledging the emotional labor Venus had already performed before our meeting. I expressed my gratitude for the self-written autobiography she had shared with me, intending to signal that I viewed her as the expert of her own experience. And to open our dialogue, I asked an open-ended question to allow her to set the initial agenda. Like I said, thank you for sharing your autobiography. Do you have any additional information you would like to share about your emotional eating? And then Venus responded by describing a sophisticated internal pattern. She explained that Her eating habit coexists with her daily responsibilities, but she noticed a distinct shift based on her mental workload. When she was occupied with practical themes or busy tasks, the urge was manageable. But when she noted that when she had mental space, for example, like times of quiet or in terms of emotional vulnerability, the habit would resurface to fill that void. During this first few minutes, I focused on the posture of non-judgmental presence, using soft verbal encouragers like mm-hmm to validate her self-awareness. And then moving to the second phase, which is the focusing process, um, I try to define the function of the behavior. Once a foundation of trust was established, I move into focusing to help us narrow down the specific function that food played in her life. I used a simple reflection to confirm my understanding of her previous point. I said, it might not occupy you if you have something to dedicate to. Is that right? And Venus confirmed this, expanding on the idea that food provided a form of emotional catharsis or a way to kill boring time. At this stage, she began to express significant sustained talk, describing the internal benefits of the behavior. She told me that eating gave her a sense of true happiness and provided a relief space where she didn't have to confront her actual problems. I listened as she explained that it felt like an escape from bad feelings. Instead of correcting her or warning her about the risks, I accepted this as her current reality, which allowed us to transition into the deeper work of evocation. So the third part is evocation, evoking process. It's about developing discrepancy and professional identity. And it's also the most critical part of the process where I thought to draw out her internal reasons for change. I asked a strategic question designed to develop discrepancy. I said, why do you want to change this thing if it's already kind of meaningful for you? And this prompt successfully elicited a wealth of change talk, characterized by desire, ability, reasons, need framework. So Venus first voiced a strong desire to free myself and become a person who takes responsibility rather than practicing avoidance. Most strikingly, she connected her change to her need for professional integrity. She shared her ambition to become a future therapist or like a psychological worker in the future. But she admitted with a great honesty, she said, if I keep use food to run away, I think I will become a person who inspire now. She realized that if she remained numbed by food, she could be unstable and unable to emphasize with the pain of her future clients. And when I asked about her ability by inquiring if she had ever tried to control the behavior before, she recalled a past success using mindfulness. She described a technique where she could pause for 5 seconds to a few minutes before eating, which gave her a sense of achievement. And I followed this with an affirmation of a corrector. I said, you are already being very sensitive and being aware of your emotions. You are already trying to change those things. Moving forward is navigating her relational roots. It's like a mother versus dog. As we moved Into the second half of the session, I guided the conversation toward the relational roots of her struggle. So Venus revealed a story, feeling neglected and having an emptiness in her heart, and I attempted to deepen this reflection by stating, um, it stays this problem have already coexisted with you for too long that you think it's unsolvable and that it has already become part of you. She then spoke about her mother, describing how her mother often ignored her pain or even yelled at her during moments of distress. I adopted a tone of careful validation during this segment, affirming her resilience. I said, "You are being very considerate and a mindful daughter to your mom, and actually, you are being very responsible for yourself because you want to solve this problem." Venus then reached a profound insight, explaining that she turned to food because, unlike humans, food wouldn't betray me. However, the energy of the session shifted when we began discussing her dog. Venus described the unconditional love and true happiness she felt in that relationship, and I mirrored her shift in energy and affirmed the strength of this bond. I said, "I do feel that you are a very loving person towards your dog, and he gave you so much energy." I used the dog as a template for a safe attachment, suggesting that this relationship gave her the power to potentially move away from her reliance on food. And near the end of our conversation, I asked Venus to imagine her future life if she were able to reach her goals. She defined her ideal state as being powerful, peaceful, and calm, a state where she could regulate her emotions without needing a fast food fix. She described true happiness not as a life without sadness, but the ability to embrace all experiences without falling into the dark side. And I noticed she became more motivated as she visualized this powerful future version of herself. And I asked her if she could use this future motivation as a tool to reject the immediate fulfillment of food. She responded with the belief that while she might not know the exact timeline, she had the possibility to change and reach that state in the future. Finally, it's a planning session. It's about commitment to the incremental growth. In the final 10 minutes, we entered the planning phase. And this is not a session for a rigid checklist, but rather for consolidating her commitment. Venus admitted she didn't have a specific recipe or schedule yet, but she stated that I think I could build a better relationship with myself, and I concluded our session by providing a summary that tied together her professional goals, her relational insights, and her hope for the future. And I closed the meeting by reinforcing our collaborative partnership with the statement, resolving those problems and let's solve it together step by step. So looking back on our session, I see a clear progression through the four processes of MI. We moved from initial report to defining the void, to exploring the deep relational trauma and career-based motivations, and finally to a vision of hope. While I occasionally use diagnostic language, such as when I suggested, so can I understand part of the reasons why you're emotional eating is because of your being neglected. The overall flow allowed Venus to voice her own reasons for change, and by the end of the session, she transitioned from viewing her problems as unsolvable to recognizing her own capacity for a calm and peaceful life. then proceed to the part 3 of this video, which is the integrative reflection and my self critique. This part um is actually informed by two primary resources. One is my own internal review of the transcript and the external feedback provided by Skylar, who is the observer in our group. So by comparing these perspectives against the AMI interviewing skills checklist, I have identified a clear discrepancy between my relational skills, which were consistently and relatively strong, and my technical skills, which remained at a beginning proficiency level. So we will talk about strength first. Both Scholar as the observer and I agreed that my strongest performance was in the relational component, specifically in building a collaborative partnership. I made a conscious effort to avoid the expert trap by treating Venus as the primary authority on her own life. And I was particularly pleased to see that Scholar noticed my use of silence. Um, when Venus struggled to find words, I resisted the urge to fill the void, allowing her to holding space necessary to process her trauma. And from the technical standpoint, I utilized permission-seeking language to share the power. For example, I asked, would it be okay if we prod further into the feeling when you try to control the urge before emotional eating? And this specific behavior aligns with the MI spirit of collaboration, ensuring that the client remains in the driver's seat of the change process. Fro- sorry. Furthermore, I successfully elicited change talk by developing discrepancy. Like I recalled asking if eating has already become meaningful to you, why do you still want to alter this behavior? And I think this question directly targeted at her internal conflict and successfully moved her into the evoking phase. Weaknesses existed as well, and I think I should pay more attention to this. It's about the partnership and writing reflex. So while the relational foundation was solid, the integrative analysis revealed significant technical blind spots. I initially felt that my use of reflections was adequate, but after the MI session, both of my self-view and scholars' critique pointed to a lack of depth. So Scholar accurately identified that I relied too heavily on simple echoes. It's like merely repeating or paraphrasing Venus' literal words. I realized that I do fall into what I call echo trap. For instance, when Venus said she was tired of trying, I simply replied that I understood she was exhausted. As I noted in my own reflection, I missed a prime opportunity for a complex reflection that could have touched on her own values. And I should have said, it sounds like you very value control, and it's frustrating when you feel you cannot meet your own standards. Failing to move beyond literal meaning hindered our ability to explore the values and beliefs beyond her exposure and discourse. Additionally, I identified a struggle with the writing reflex. As mentioned before as well, I occasionally become too directive, such as when I suggested, have you ever tried to think of your future better self? It might be an effective method. And I think this was a diagnostic stance that interfered with Venus' own generation of internal motivation. Schuyler echoed this by noting that I focused on question too quickly, moving it into planning and behavioral recommendations before Venus had fully built the necessary trust and resolved her ambivalence. Also, I think thanks to Schuyler, one of the most insightful pieces is about my affirmations. While I thought I was being supportive, Skylar noted that my affirmations remained somewhat superficial, and I recognize Venus' courage to be honest and her love for her dog, but I failed to accurately recognize her inner resilience because by staying on the surface, I might have adventedly hindered her ability to move towards a deeper self-compassion. So, in conclusion, I think this integrative process has shown me that being nice is not the same as doing MI or like a professional therapist. While I demonstrated a promising level in warmth and authenticness, I think my technical integrity requires rigorous refinement. So, in order to move forward full competency, I think my future practice will focus on three specific goals. The first one is prioritizing complex reflections. The second is softening sustained talk. The third one is refining affirmations. By addressing these gaps, yeah, I hope to transform my natural empathetic presence into a precise clinical tool that truly empowers clients like Venus to realize their own potential for change. And this is the end of um, my reflection video. Thank you for watching.